When it comes to your back squat, or any squat in particular, there's a lot of misinformation out there that's often peddled by good intentions, but perhaps maybe a lack of actually just being able to help people in different scenarios, right? One of the really common ones, for example, is having to drive your knees out to achieve more glute activation. That is just not anatomically what the glutes are responsible for. They are responsible for some external rotation, but a big driver of the glutes is hip extension. That's largely what they do. And so this idea of pushing knees out to get more glutes is just not necessarily the right action to take all the time. That's just one of the examples. So what I want to do is I want to take you through how I would go through a squat. I do not recommend you facing out of the rack when you do this. I'm only doing this today because I want to be able to talk to the camera and because I want to show you. But when you do this, typically face in so that you can dump the bar into the rack or into your safeties or whatever. All right, so when I go to get set up, one of the key things that we see with squats when people get set up is they get set up in this very extended position, right? Because we think that's nice and proud and I'm starting nice and tall and then I can sit back. But what tends to happen in this position is because I'm already starting with my back extended and my hips lifted and extended out this way or flexed into this way, then what's going to happen is I don't really have anywhere to go from there. Right? It's really hard to move into a new position and create space if you're already in that position, right? In the same way that if I start here and I want to then go into something higher, it's really hard for me to get any deeper because I'm already in that hip flexion. Same thing here. If I already am in this extended position, it's really hard for me to create space in my hips. And you can see I can do it, but man, it's very uncomfortable. And I guarantee you I would not squat a lot of weight or squat very comfortably that way. So typically what I like to do is get people to start with a comfortable stance that feels good for them, raise the heels if they need it a little bit, that's totally fine. And I actually want them to start in more of a neutral position. And then once we break that neutral position, we break at the hips first. Okay, so whether you want to call that ribs down, whether you want to get them to tuck the hips under a little bit, tuck their chin, there's a lot of different ways to get there. But we want to start in this neutral, more stacked position. Okay, from here, we're going to take a small breath and just press into our abs a little bit. So I'm not trying to, because then you see what happens? I'm extended again, and I don't want that. Okay, so I'm going to take a small breath, and I'm going to control that pressure. Okay, so I'm just going to stay nice and tight here. You don't need to balloon yourself out like all these powerlifters do with a big, we don't need that. If you're just squatting every day in the gym, unless you're squatting thousands of pounds or whatever, you know, hundreds of pounds, you don't really need that big balloon breath in, and you're not going to need all the gear that goes with it, okay? So what we're going to do is we're going to come under the bar. We're going to pick a hand width that feels comfortable for us, right? I typically like to go between the first ring on this bar and then the middle where the knurling ends in the center. I like to go somewhere between there. That feels comfortable for me. Just make sure they're even. I'm then going to come under the bar, make sure that my hips are under the bar, stand up, step it forwards. Okay, again, this is where I would say, look, some people like to go really wide. That's fine. I can have the same principles wide as I can narrow. Okay, it doesn't really matter. They're going to have certain requirements, but it doesn't really matter too much. So find what's comfortable. Okay, then from here, I don't want to start really extended. Already there, if you do that, you're probably going to feel like it feels pretty average and your spine is sort of taking all this load. Don't do it. Pull the ribs in a little bit. Keep the chest down. Okay, so chest up is not always a good idea. Keep the eyes down a little bit. And then we're basically going to lead with the hips. So I'm going to break at the hips, sit down into my squat, and then I'm just going to think about pushing my feet into the floor and standing back up. It doesn't have to be more complex than that. If your knees happen to dive in a little bit, that's actually pretty normal because your knees want to find a level of rotation to allow them to express force. Right? It's very normal for your body to look for internal rotation in any sort of joint to actually express force. When you press your foot into the ground, it naturally wants to pronate. If you look at any runner, the same thing happens. So don't worry if you get a little bit of this. If you look at a lot of Olympic weightlifters who are very, very, very strong, probably the strongest in the world pound for pound, they get a lot of, well, some of them, get a lot of internal knee travel. It's not the end of the world, okay? So again, stacked position, lift the tailbone, down into my squat, okay? You might have heel raise, that's fine. All right, and then I'm just gonna think about pressing up, boom, back to my stacked position. All right, so you can see that I'm not doing a big sort of push my knees out all the way up. In fact, most of the time when people want to drive their knees out because they can't get their depth, they're actually making it harder for themselves, putting more stress on their back because you're not allowing your body to actually drive through the adductors, through the quads, through the feet pronating. You're actually missing out on a lot of strength from some of these muscles, from the glutes that want to have that solid base to press into and extend the hips. Pushing your knees out more and more and more is not the only way, or not necessarily the best way, for everyone to go about fixing their squat. So there you have it. That's my tips. I'll do more. There'll be more coming on sort of warm-ups and some other variations, things like that. But when it comes to the back squat, that is what we have found works so well for us. That's what we've found works for our clients. And obviously everyone has different mechanics, and everyone's going to move a little bit differently. So this is just strategies to help people figure out what might work for them. Okay, this isn't the golden rule. This isn't the only way. It's just about finding what works for you. I hope that helped. Make sure you like, subscribe, follow our channels on Instagram, Facebook, wherever you are, and we'll keep hopefully delivering good information that helps you out.